Cool. All right, we're going to start in the very back of the cabin, work our way forward. So some of the first things you want to check for is to make sure all the switches are in the right position. The crew's probably going to actually do this, but you want your ramp position off, door to normal position, and then you move over here. You want to make sure that all of your hatches open and close properly, that the pins are installed, nothing's missing, the lanyard's not broken, and the balls are not missing from these pins, and also that all of these hatches are shear wired on the back. So you check that for all 4 of them. As you work your way forward, you want to check into your main gearbox drip panel. It should be open for you on pre-flight. You want to make sure that your filter button right here is not popped for your aux filter. You want to make sure that your this line here is not messed up, and it's idle clamped to where you're not going to have any chafing, to where the line is going to be rubbing in flight. And actually we want to make sure that your slip ring looks good, the electrical connections in there are not messed up, and your rotary coupling isn't leaking any hydraulic fluid when you're sitting here statically. You also check your chip detectors to make sure that they're in the right position of flow right here instead of off. And yeah, that's pretty much what you're checking for in here, just overall integrity of the thing. You can work your way forward. You want to check all your breakaway valves. So you're going to have 13 on each wall and 3 in the overhead. So what you're looking for is these things have, let me find one that's got a good one that you can see. You can get the camera back here. You have this silver thing right here, and you see this line going in the direction of the flow that the fuel would be going. You want to make sure that it's facing that way, and that you don't have any of this 8802 like on there preventing it from being able to shut. Alright, so as you come forward, you continue to just check your walls and your overhead basically for any leaks, any damaged lines, integrity of everything, any damage. Your circuit breaker panels, so maintenance is required to pull a bunch of circuit breakers when they're working on the APE and doing anything. So you want to make sure that you have your ignition circuit breakers in, and you're checking overall all your circuit breakers, that anything that you would want to have power to, that you want to have power to. Sometimes they could be troubleshooting something and they'll remove the power for it and never push the circuit breaker back in. So you want to check all 3 circuit breaker panels to make sure you have everything you need pressed in. Check your AFCS broom closet in here, make sure that everything is the way it should be. So all of these should have torque stripes on them right here to let you know if there's any slippage in the flight controls. So these stripes should not be broken. You want to check to make sure that all of the castle nuts have cotter pins on them, and that there is no leaking, or your roll damper on the bottom. Here, we'll do the roll damper back here. You want to check your roll damper, make sure that spring is good. There's no fluid coming out of this. It's a viscous damper right here. Yep, so you want to check this roll damper and this spring, make sure that there's no fluid coming out of here. This spring is not damaged or broken. You also want to check your fast rod to make sure that it is not damaged or sheared. So what you want to do is you want to grab this top one right here, which I'm going to point to these things with the thing and then twist. So you want to grab this top one back here that's connected to your fast actuator, and then the bottom one over here, which is going to be the one that's above this green one right here, so right there. You want to grab them both and you want to twist them in the opposite directions to see if they spin independently. They shouldn't be able to. If they do, then that's bad. So you get them, try to twist them independently in both directions. It shouldn't be able to do it. Well, that's good. You also want to check in your overhead, look at your LBA, longitudinal bias actuator. What you're looking for is this silver and then this yellow stripe, and then you should see the actual LBA. If you see silver, yellow, and then silver again, it could possibly be bad. We'll see when you do it. So when pre-flying your starboard eBay, one of the first things you want to check is that your flight switch, your rattle switch is up into flight and not into test. You want to check all your electrical components to make sure that your electrical wires are connected and not damaged in any way, and overall security of everything that you have in here. You also want to check your flight control rods for any excessive play in them. Check your balance springs, make sure they look good. Your flight control rods. And that's pretty much what you're going to be checking in here. If you have a fuel probe, you also want to check the components on that to make sure that there's no fuel coming out of them or any leaking, well, not leaking, but any electrical components that are messed up, and just overall integrity. And then this eBay is just a bunch of electrical components in here, so you want to make sure that all your wires are connected properly, that you don't see any broken wires or any fog. You also want to take a look at your pedals from here and through the chin bubbles to make sure that the pedals are not missing any components that they're supposed to have on there, like cotter pins on the castle nuts or anything. Alright, so for the nose landing gear, you want to check the security of the door. Make sure that your light is secure and the electrical wires for your light are connected and not broken. You want to check your co-rotator on this side, and you want to check for excessive play in here. This is fine. You also want to check your tires. You want to make sure that you have actual good tread on them and that they're pressurized to where they should be. So if they look low, you can just ask maintenance. They'll come out here and test the tire pressure, and these, they have to be within 5 psi of each other and in the acceptable range. Now, you want to make sure that your lights are clean, so turn them on, you can see them, and spotlight, landing light. So pre-fly, you want to check your down indicator. You want to make sure that you're not grabbing this strut right here. This thing should be clean. It should be clean with lint-free rags and hydraulic fluid. You want to check your servicing pin up here for hydraulic servicing to see that if it's popped or not. You want to make sure when you're in here, you're not grabbing any of these cables right here. And you want to make sure that all your electrical connections are properly connected and there's no hydraulic leaks. You also want to make sure you have this pin in here before you crawl under here. So to open the eBay, you press down on the forward side, pull it out, rotate it up, and then to latch it, just pull one of these, latch it on there, get the other side, and do the same. Alright, when pre-flying the eBay, you want to make sure you're checking again for any FOD or any unsecured things. You want to make sure all your electrical connections are properly connected, and that overall integrity of everything looks good. You also want to check right here your collective damper, similar to your roll damper. You want to make sure that it's secure, there's no leaks coming out of here, and all your flight controls should have these slippage stripes to let you know that if they're you know, they're no longer where they were set to, and that all your castle nuts have cotter pins in them. So on the way back to your main landing gear, you want to check your position lights to make sure that they're secure. Going back, making sure that you look down and make sure that none of your fuel sample doors are hanging down open. If they are, you can just secure them like right here. And there's a second one back here for the other fuel tank. Like your nose landing gear, you want to check your actual tire pressure to make sure that it looks like it's not low. If it does look low, you can ask them to check. Again, they have to be within 5 psi of each other. You want to check the tread on here. If there's a bald spot on any spot, it's down, but you want to check. They'll actually have the cut limit on the side of the tire to tell you. So the port main landing gear will have this ground wire right here. You want to make sure that it's attached and it's actually touching the ground when the aircraft's on the floor. The starboard one won't have that, but the rest of the landing gear will be briefly the same. You also want to check your weight on wheel switch to make sure it's secure, not damaged. You can check your wear indicator. So before you climb down here, always make sure that you have your pin installed and that your indicator looks like that. But you want to check these right here are your wear indicator pins for your brake pads to let you know when they're starting to get too worn. You want to make sure that they actually have some pad left and that they're wearing evenly, so they're not the brake's not being applied unevenly. So as you look up here, just like the other one, you want to check your hydraulic pin right here to make sure that that is not popped up, letting you know you need hydraulic servicing. Again, try not to grab this right here because you want to keep it free of any dirt or debris or anything like that, because that's going to get pulled up in there when you retract the landing gear. You want to check for any leaking of hydraulic lines and just overall integrity of everything that's inside of this compartment. So before you climb down here, always make sure that you have your pin installed and that your indicator looks like that. But you want to check these right here are your wear indicator pins for your brake pads to let you know when they're starting to get too worn. You want to make sure that they actually have some pad left and that they're wearing evenly, so they're not the brake's not being applied unevenly. So as you look up here, just like the other one, you want to check your hydraulic pin right here to make sure that that is not popped up, letting you know you need hydraulic servicing. Again, try not to grab this right here because you want to keep it free of any dirt or debris or anything like that, because that's going to get pulled up in there when you retract the landing gear. You want to check for any leaking of hydraulic lines and just overall integrity of everything that's inside of this compartment. pre-flight, you want to make sure that you're just checking security of everything, make sure nothing's coming off. As you're coming back here, you're looking at making sure that all of your bolts and screws and rivets are installed properly, nothing's missing. So when you come out to pre-flight, the cover should be removed off of these. You have 4 of them. When you're looking at those, you just want to make sure they're not scratched or damaged or anything anyway. Make sure you have no missing bolts in any of these panels down here. If your tail is folded, you can come back here, look at the TRDC. You should have clean grease on it and overall integrity, no leaks or anything back here. Everything's looking, you know, secure. Probably not gonna be tall enough to grab anything. So when pre-flying the intermediate gearbox, when the tail is spread, you want both your tail gearbox and your intermediate gearbox to have the fluid in the middle of the bullseye. Now when it's folded, you want the IGB to be on the bottom circle of the bullseye and the TGB to be on the top half of that. That's how you know that it's good. Well, if you have it folded, you can check your chip detector down here to make sure it's secure, and then the electrical wires are damaged, as well as seeing your, on this side, your pressure switch to make sure that it is also secure and not damaged. And while you're looking at this as a whole, you just want to make sure that none of the bolts are missing on here, because otherwise you're gonna have to, you know, do a FOD search and have maintenance come take a look at it. Alright, so if the tail's folded, you'll be able to get a look at it right here. You can always ask for a stand to get up there and check the servicing of your tail rotor hub and your tail gearbox. So when your tail gearbox is folded, like I said, it should be on the top half of that bullseye, which you could probably see. You might have to show the flashlight. I don't know how much that helps. So the fluid should be at the top half. When you're checking it, you always want to make sure you give the tail a little bit of a shake to see that you actually see the fluid moving in there. When you're looking at the blades, you want to check to make sure that you don't see any damage on the front or back sides of the blades, like any cracks or, you know, just damage. You want to make sure you're not grabbing the trailing edge of them. Alright, so when you go out to pre-fly the outboard side of the number 3 engine, you want to check for security of the exhaust pipe. Also looking inside to see if you see any damage to any of those blades, possibly flooded out of the engine or something. So just work your way forward. This should already be open for you, and the EEPS, the intake plug should probably be installed. If it is, you want to make sure that you remove it and you look inside of the engine for any FOD, and you're checking pretty much the stator vanes to make sure they're not damaged. So you want to check to make sure that none of these blades in here are damaged. And that it's free of FOD. You want to check your EEPS to make sure. You check the outside first to make sure that none of your strata tubes are missing. You want to check to make sure that this seal is not disbonding or coming apart. You want to check your foam seal and your rubber seal. You should have some of this like Vaseline type grease on there to make sure that it's not going to dry rot or anything. You definitely want to look inside of here at the doors to make sure you don't see light coming through those doors, letting you know that there's gaps. You can let stuff come in. You want to check for FOD, standing water, or anything inside of this EEPS. This D-ring, you check top to bottom. Make sure it's not loose or cracked. As well as this. You want to make sure that there's no cracks or damage on this. So you come check your VGA. You want to make sure that it's secure. No fuel should be coming out of it. You check little dog bones here to make sure that they're secure as well. And overall, looking at the engine for any hot spots, damages, leaking fuel, security of everything, broken electrical wires, and chafing. So you just pretty much give everything a little tug to make sure that everything is connected and secure, that no braided lines are rubbing against anything hard or metal. So they'll have these idle clamps here. You have chip detector wire right here to make sure that it's not damaged. And you just want to make sure pretty much everything else is not leaking and it's fine. You'll be able to see the filter button and the fuel control when you look at the other side of the engine. So again, just hot spots and overall damage, bubbling, or unsecure items, leaking fuel, and your isolation mounts right here. You want to make sure that they are within limit. in the green is within limits. Green and gold is where you pretty much want it, right against it. Gold is over service, red is under service, so if you need a service, you can just ask maintenance. You want to look, make sure that your accumulator is secure, and that you actually have your nitrogen pressure right here and your nitrogen accumulator gauge for your first stage hydraulic system. You want to check the PDIs, the filter buttons, on your first stage filters. You got one right here and one on the first stage manifold, which is going to be right there. You also want to check the filter button on your first stage manifold. Make sure that's not popped out. So this one doesn't have a rotor brake reservoir, but you want to make sure that if your rotor brake reservoir would be right here, and you want to make sure that it's got its fluid. Basically, you're looking at your fin tube heat exchanger. Make sure you don't have a bunch of damage, any leaking lines. You're looking at gaps in these Thomas couplings, and overall integrity of everything you got back here. Electrical wires connected, and security of your IBIS detector. So some aircrafts will have a U2 heat exchanger. If it's installed, you want to make sure that you don't have any leaking. All your electrical connections are secure the way they should be. You want to check your main gearbox oil filter back here to make sure you don't have any of these filter buttons popped. You have a yellow one, which means it's impending bypass, and a red one, which means the filter is clogged and being bypassed. Checking security and electrical connections on your generators. You also want to look to make sure that just basically everything back there is connected the way it should be, like your NR tack, your NF tack way over there next to your NF flex shaft, and no FOD, excessive like oil or hydraulic fluid on the ground. I'm checking the main gearbox platform. I'm going to check the filter buttons, which will be on the top of these filters, to make sure they're not popped. You want to check your belt cranks and flight control rods for security. You don't want them to be too loose. If they feel like you're having too much play, you can just ask maintenance. They'll come in, they'll measure the amount of play in them. Your chip detector, make sure all your electrical connections are connected properly. And servicing of the main gearbox. Check this dipstick like you would check in a car. You can see the fluid level on there. You're checking the main rotor head. You want to make sure the swash plate doesn't have too much play in it when you're moving it. You want to check your pitch control rods. So they should be able to move like this. So you got the bearing in there. There should be a stopper in there preventing metal on metal when you go in both directions. What you're checking for is play, up, down, forward, back, left, and right. You want to make sure that you don't feel it moving or clicking. You want to make sure that these are safety wired around on the top and bottom, and that these bolts, the bolt head should be in the direction that the rotor head is spinning. So the bolt head should be on this side. If they're installed on this side, they're backwards. Make sure flap restrainers move smoothly, and you're making sure that your rotor dampers don't look like they have any leaking in them from their hydraulic lines. You also want to look on the bottom of your swash plate here and check to make sure that you have your bearing monitor system sensors, that they're installed here. They're safety wired, they're not loose, they're not disconnected or anything like that. And you don't see any leaking coming out of the hydraulic lines going to your forward, lateral, and aft main rotor heads. Alright, so when pre-flying the blades, you want to check all your hydraulic lines and your electrical connections to make sure the hydraulic lines are not leaking and your electrical lines are connected properly. A lot of the times you'll see the one right here for your blade tip light disconnected. That's fine as long as it's not loose. It can either be safety wired to it so it's not flapping around. You want to check to make sure you have fluid in your banana reservoir. You have a max line and a mid line in there. You want to make sure that it's in between the two, preferably towards the max. And also you want to check your hinge pin reservoir, which is here. You might want to shine a flashlight on it. You'll probably see better ducking down. Actually, I don't know if you can see good in there. You want to check your reservoir to make sure that that has fluid in it as well. Alright, so 6-year blades are going to look just like this with all these blade fold components on there. You want to make sure that they're not leaking and anything like that. If you look behind you, you'll see the number 1 blade. It's going to be missing most of those components, but you still want to check to make sure that your electrical lines are not loose. And you want to check for your damper, nitrogen servicing right here, and just overall integrity of everything on here. You also want to give the blades a quick look up and down to make sure that the top of the blades don't look like they're damaged in any way. Alright, so when you pre-fly the damper accumulator, you want to check this pin on the top to make sure that the servicing is where it should be. Depending on the temperature is where it's going to sit at, but a good rule of thumb is if it's down, it's drowning. That means it's a saying we say saying that if the pin is too low, it's over serviced, and if the pin is sticking up too high, it's under serviced. So when you come out of pre-flight, all of these should be removed. They're not here. It's a clear plastic shield protected. This thing has strontium 90 in it. You want to make sure that you don't see 2 black stripes. You should have 2 white stripes here, and this button should not be popped out here. That'll let you know that the blade is losing pressure in the spar, and that's going to emit the radiation that the IBIS detector would pick up to give you your BIM light. So when you come out of pre-flight, you should want to make sure that you see the 2 white stripes, this button's not popped, and that clear plastic shields are all removed. Pre-flying this part of the engine compartment, you want to check these drive shafts. You want to make sure that there's not a lot of play in them when you move them. You also want to rotate them to check the Thomas couplings on all the sections, here, and then there were inputs to the main gearbox. So you do that by rotating it and just looking for gaps. While you're rotating, you also want to make sure you're checking this fan belt. You check it just like a serpentine on belt on the car. You want to make sure that there's tension on there, it's not just going to come off. You're looking for dry rot or any of the core showing. So as you rotate, you're checking all your Thomas couplings and you're checking your fan belt. Close this. Now pre-flying the inboard side of the engine, you want to check this VGA the same way you did the other one. No fuel should be leaking. You want to make sure that your bones here are good, and this cable and spring are not damaged or kinked up in any way. You also, when you're looking at your fuel control, make sure there's no fuel leaking out of it. Your T2 lines are pretty much just held on by these little clamps. So if they're clamped too far down the thing, you could pull them off. You want to make sure that they're on there tight. And your P3 line, you want to make sure that it's connected properly. Again, overall integrity, no damage, hot spots, bubbling. Electrical connections are secure properly. Your quick disconnects, the silver one should have a green stripe on them, and it should be even, so you can know that it's sitting properly. And your gold ones will have teeth, which this one's not installed, but there'd be a gold one right here, and the teeth should be lined up properly. Some of these saddle tanks will have a sight gauge to let you know where the fluid's sitting at, so you can see it. Some of them don't, and get it, me almost falling right there. You want to check your torque sensor to make sure that everything's connected properly. Again, no damage, hot spots, leaks, integrity of everything, chafing of wires, and pretty much that. So as you move forward to the nose gearbox, you want to check the servicing. The dipstick is where the fillip port is. You want to see where your fluid is sitting at. If it's low, they'll service it up, and then you have to wipe it off because it's got a filter on the top. You want to check to make sure that all your electrical connections are connected properly. So you have your pressure switch here. You can see your chip detector and your temperature sensors, but you want to make sure that all your electrical connections are connected properly. There's no chafing of these wires, and there's no damage to anything that you have in here. So as you look in this dash panel here, you can check the servicing of your U1 system. So ideally you want it it's in the green to be properly serviced. You would want green and gold. But you also got to keep in mind if you have the aircraft spread or folded in any way. Fully spread, green and gold is perfect. If you have one item spread, like just the tail or just the blades in the middle of the green, and if you have them both folded, green and red. So if you see green and red and you're folded twice, it's serviced properly. So as you look in here, you want to make sure that everything you see looks good. You can see the filter buttons on the top for your U1. Here's one over here, shining directly on it. You're also looking at any damage to anything you see in here, excessive hydraulic leaks, any FOD, broken wires, looks like anything is chafing. Pretty much the integrity of everything that you see in here that you can get your hands on and that you can pretty much see with your eyes to make sure that it's all connected, not leaking, or any damage to them. Alright, so for the AGB, you want to check your servicing. With the dipstick here, just pull it out, check what fluid level you're sitting at. So put it back in. You want to look and check your mixing unit to make sure you have all your cotter pins on your castle nuts, all your stripes to make sure that nothing has been slipping. You want to give a feel for your flight control rods to make sure that nothing feels loose, and check your yaw shear pin back here. It should have a wire on it, and then it should be looking like that pretty much. And check an overall integrity of everything, excessive hydraulic leaks, any broken wires. You can check the servicing of your second stage reservoir over here. There's a sight gauge that's a little difficult to see, but it's right there. And then for your U2, if it's installed, you have this type of gauge, which would be like a plunger that sticks out and would tell you where the fluid's at. You would want it sitting here at the full, or anywhere between the full and the refill line is good. Make sure all electrical connections are connected properly, and that your fire bottles are serviced up to the right pressure. So the pressure is dependent on the air temperature. They all should have this sticker on here that lets you know, depending on what the OAT is, what pressure it should be sitting at. And you want to make sure that all 4 of your fire bottles are looking good. You want to check your accumulators. You want to check your accumulators to make sure that you don't see like any hydraulic fluid coming out of the top part right here, or any like cracks throughout it, or any damage on them for both the number 1 and the number 2 accumulator. This one is missing the drive shaft for the 8 clutch, but you want to make sure that it rotates properly. It would be here, and that there's no it's not like loose or excessive play on it. And just again, overall checking everything to make sure you don't see any damage. You see your U1 module over here. You have filter buttons on the bottom of these filters. You want to feel to see, you have 2 of them there, to feel the filter buttons are popped. You want to make sure your start valves are, you know, the electrical wires are not damaged to them. And then again, just all your electrical lines not damaged, connected properly. All your hydraulic lines not leaking and secure, and every other component not damaged, secure, or leaking in any. All electrical connections are properly connected. So you're checking your pressure switches here. Make sure that they're all connected properly, that all your lines are secure. You want to check to make sure that no fuel is coming out of your 8 fuel lines, and there's no damage to anything here, that your intake is secure and it's not disbonding. This this rubbery part can sometimes start to come off. You want to make sure that there's no damage to any of this chamber you have here. Your electrical connections back here in here should have boots on them to protect them. You want to make sure that they're connected properly though with the boot on there. This one is missing. These boots have slidden off. You can just kind of make sure they're secure. But they're there to protect these electrical connections right there for your temperature switches. Make sure that your bottle is secure, not loose. And you want to check the servicing of your ape here. Just a twist cap and a dipstick to make sure that you have the right amount of oil in there. You also want to check your fire detectors to make sure that they're clean, so they can pick up that infrared radiation if need be. So when pre-flying this side of an engine, you want to make sure that you're checking your fuel control to make sure you don't see any leaks. You want to make sure that your T2 lines are secured properly, as well as your P3 line. You want to check your VGA to make sure there's no fuel leaking, and this feedback cable and spring are secure. They're not kinked up or damaged in any way, and these dog bones are secure as well. You're looking overall the whole engine as a whole to make sure you don't see any hot spots or bubbling, discoloration, or anything like that. And your isolation mounts on here, you want to make sure that they are within limits. You don't want this lip here, where my thumbnail is, flush with this bottom part right here. If you do, let maintenance know. You want to check for chafing of any of these metal lines against each other. They should all be idle clamped to where they're not rubbing against anything hard, or they should have chafe tape or this protective coating on them. I want to check electrical connections to make sure that they're all secure, no broken wires or any damage to them, as well as all your fire detectors to make sure that they're clean and not gunked up so they can pick up the infrared radiation if there's a fire. So some of your saddle tanks will have a sight gauge on them. This one does. You have a sight gauge on the side right here, which is going to let you know how much fluid is in there. So if you have one, you can use it to check. If not, then you don't have one. So when pre-flying this side of an engine, you want to make sure that you're checking your fuel control to make sure you don't see any leaks. You want to make sure that your T2 lines are secured properly, as well as your P3 line. You want to check your VGA to make sure there's no fuel leaking, and this feedback cable and spring are secure. They're not kinked up or damaged in any way, and these dog bones are secure as well. You're looking overall the whole engine as a whole to make sure you don't see any hot spots or bubbling, discoloration, or anything like that. And your isolation mounts on here, you want to make sure that they are within limits. You don't want this lip here, where my thumbnail is, flush with this bottom part right here. If you do, let maintenance know. You want to check for chafing of any of these metal lines against each other. They should all be idle clamped to where they're not rubbing against anything hard, or they should have chafe tape or this protective coating on them. I want to check electrical connections to make sure that they're all secure, no broken wires or any damage to them, as well as all your fire detectors to make sure that they're clean and not gunked up so they can pick up the infrared radiation if there's a fire. So some of your saddle tanks will have a sight gauge on them. This one does. You have a sight gauge on the side right here, which is going to let you know how much fluid is in there. So if you have one, you can use it to check. If not, then you don't have one. As you look towards the back, you want to make sure that your overheat is connected and secure on the top and bottom. And you look in the back of the exhaust pipe, so you can get a good look at all the blades. The cover should be removed to make sure that you don't see any damage to them that could indicate you possibly have faulted out an engine. So when you're looking at your EEPs, you want to make sure that all your straddle tubes are there. Nothing's loose, no damage, no missing bolts or screws or anything. Your door and your fan have freedom of movement. And it should be open, but if it's not, just unlatch the top and bottom. Doesn't have a lot of remove for some reason. Unlatch the top and bottom. The intake plug should be removed for you already, but if it's not, you come in, take it. Sometimes they're removed, sometimes they're not. You look inside, check the blades to make sure that you don't have any damage or any FOD. Look inside the EEPs, make sure you don't see any standing water, FOD, or anything that could damage the engine once we start motoring. And you're also checking the doors to make sure you don't see light coming through the doors. Let's check the doors to make sure that you don't see any light coming through. To let you know that you're not getting a proper seal on the front of the EEPs. Alright, so to close it, you just pull this back in, press it closed, get a latch, latch it. You want to make sure your latches are actually catching to the thing. Sometimes they'll clip and they'll just fall right back down if they're not actually catching what they're supposed to.